Hello students, our today's topic is respiratory system overview. What is respiration? Respiration is a process by which oxygen is taken in and the carbon dioxide that is given out. The first breath takes place only after birth. We all know that the fetal lungs they are non-functional. So during the intrauterine life, the exchange of gases between the fetal blood and mother's blood occurs through the placenta. The respiratory system it is the set of organs that allow a person to breathe and exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. The respiratory system it performs two major tasks: external respiration and the internal respiration. The external respiration that involves the exchange of respiratory gases that is the oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and the blood, whereas the internal respiration that involves the exchange of gases between the blood and the tissues. Important question that is asked that can be asked in your entrance exam is what is the normal respiratory rate at different ages? For the newborns it is 30 to 60 per minute. At the early childhood it is 20 to 40 per minute. For late childhood it is 15 to 25 per minute, and for the adults it is 12 to 16 per minute. So this figure will represent the respiratory system. What are the functions of respiratory system? Number one, it supplies the oxygen, it supplies the body with oxygen and disposes the carbon dioxide. It filters inspired air, produces sound, contains receptor for smell, helps to regulate blood pH, rids the body of some excess water and heat. What are the phases of respiration? The respiration it occurs in two phases, that is inspiration and expiration. Inspiration means the air enter the lungs from the atmosphere, and expiration means that the air leaves the lung. So inspiration it is a active process, whereas expiration it is a passive process that forces the gases out of the lungs. The respiratory tract it can be subdivided into two groups structurally. One is the upper respiratory tract and other is the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract will consist of nose, nasal cavity, sinuses and pharynx, whereas the lower respiratory tract consists of larynx, trachea, bronchial tree and lungs. The organs of respiratory tract they can be divided into two groups. Functionally, that is the conducting portion and the respiratory portion. The conducting portion it is the system of interconnecting cavities and tubes that conduct air into the lungs. Whereas the respiratory portion is that portion system where the exchange of respiratory gases occurs. It involves bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and the alveoli. So the respiratory tract it includes nose, pharynx, trachea, larynx, bronchi, and lungs. The nose, that is the first organ of the respiratory tract, and it provides entrance for the inhaled air. The nose performs the process of warming, moistening, and filtering of inhaled air. It has two portions, the external nose and the internal nose. The nose, it is a bony and cartilaginous structure. The bony part is made up of frontal, nasal, and maxillary bone. The cartilage part is made up of septal cartilage, lateral, and the alar cartilage. Remember the lining of nose, it is lined by highly vascular ciliated columnar epithelium. Remember it for your entrance exam, it contains mucus secreting goblet cells. So this is the structure of the nose. The nasal cavity at the base of nose, two openings separated by nasal septum, along with the nasal cartilage that will be present. The openings are called nostrils, through which air enters to reach the nasal cavity. The anterior nares are the opening of the nasal cavity contain small hairs, whereas the posterior nares they are nasal cavity opening into the pharynx. The paranasal sinuses are the air-filled spaces. They are present within the maxillary, frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid bone of the skull. These spaces open to the nasal cavity and is filled with the mucous membrane. These sinuses reduce the weight of skull. So function of nasal cavity, it helps in the passage of air across the nasal cavity. It helps in air conditioning. The inhaled air it is filtered, warmed, humidified in the nasal cavity. It is composed of three parts: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Nasopharynx is the uppermost portion, oropharynx the middle portion, and laryngopharynx is the lowermost portion. So it is a common passage for air and food. It provides a resonating chamber for speech, sound, etc. So this is the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. The epiglottis, it is a leaf-shaped piece of cartilage found in the entrance of larynx. It prevents food from entering the trachea or the windpipe. So during swelling, what you will see, there will be elevation of the larynx. So these are the function of pharynx: passage way for food and air, taste, warming and humidifying, hearing, protection, speech, etc. All these are function of pharynx. The larynx, it is triangular chamber in the front upper part of the neck. A prominent elevation present in the front of larynx is Adam's apple. It is made up of cartilage, three are single, three paired. The single cartilage, they are thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, epiglottis, whereas the pair cartilage are the retinoid, corniculate, and cuneiform cartilage. The trachea, it is a flexible tube and is known as windpipe. It extends from the mediastinum and lies anterior to esophagus and inferior to the larynx. So remember, at the level of the sternal angle, the trachea bifurcates into two smaller tubes, the left and right primary bronchi. Each primary bronchus will project laterally toward the lungs. So each lung it is enclosed by bilateral serous membrane that is known as pleura or pleural sac. The pleura it has two layers, the inner visceral and outer parietal layer. Intrapleural space, it is the space that is present in between the two layers of pleura. In some pathological condition, you will see the pleural cavity that will expand with the accumulation of air that is known as pneumothorax, or with the accumulation of water that is known as hydrothorax, or with the accumulation of blood that is known as hemothorax, or with the accumulation of pus that is known as pyothorax. The lung is divided into two parts, left lung and right lung. The left lung is divided into two lobes by oblique fissure. The left lung is smaller than the right lung. The cardiac notch, it has a cardiac notch that accommodates the heart. The right lung, it is divided into three lobes by oblique and horizontal fissure. The right lung is located more superiorly in the body due to the lever on the right side. So the various part of lungs, they are apex, base, costal surface and medial surface. The lung has a round apex that extends up to root of neck. It has base that is concave and associated with thoracic surface of diaphragm. The costal surface, it has a convex costal surface that is associated with costal cartilage, ribs and intercostal muscle. It has a medial surface that is concave. The triangular shape helium is present fifth to seventh thoracic vertebra. The trachea and bronchi they are together called the tracheobronchial tree. It forms the part of air passage. The trachea it bifurcates into two main parts or primary bronchus called right and left bronchus. Each primary bronchus enters the lung and divides into secondary bronchus. The secondary bronchus divide into tertiary bronchus. The tertiary bronchi divides into many generations of bronchioles. When the diameter of bronchiole becomes 1 mm or less, it is known as terminal bronchioles. And terminal bronchioles continuous divides into respiratory bronchioles. What is respiratory unit? It is defined as the structural and functional unit of the lung. As we know, the respiratory unit it starts from the respiratory bronchioles. Each bronchioles divide into alveolar duct. The alveolar duct enter into large structure known as alveolar sac. So, the alveolar sac will consist of cluster of alveoli. So what would the respiratory unit consist? It includes the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar duct, alveolar sac, antrum and alveoli. The alveolar epithelium it consists of alveolar cells or pneumocytes that are of two types, namely type 1 alveolar cells or type 2 alveolar cells. The type 1 alveolar cells they are squamous epithelial cells forming 95% of total number of cells. These cells form the site of gaseous exchange between the alveolus and the blood. And the type 2 alveolar cells they are cuboidal in nature. The type 2 alveolar cells will secrete alveolar fluid and surfactant. How lung works? The air enters your lungs through a system of pipes that is known as bronchi. The alveoli are where the important work of gas exchange takes place between your air and your blood. Covering each alveolus is whole network of little blood vessels known as capillaries. It is important that the air in the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries are very close together so that oxygen and carbon dioxide they can move between them. So when you breathe in, air comes down the trachea and through the bronchi into the alveoli. So this fresh air will have lot of oxygen in it, and some of this oxygen will travel across the wall of alveoli into your bloodstream. Traveling in the opposite direction is the carbon dioxide that crosses from the blood in the capillaries into the air in the alveoli and is breathed out. So in this way you bring in to your body the oxygen that you need to live and get rid of the waste product that is the carbon dioxide.